to intimidate them.
Russia has fired its first legal missile at Brussels. Moscow is suing Euroclear for $230 billion, calling the EU's frozen assets plan outright theft, not sanctions. The Kremlin warns Europe, touch Russian money and the financial war escalates.
The fact is that the European Union wants to create this 80,000 billion forints, and this would lead to an escalation of risks that we haven't seen in the past 2 or 3 years. Because the use of Russian money after the consumption of Russian money is a war provocation that has never been so serious in the past 2 or 3 years. And one of the biggest risks of the lengthening of the war is that the war is escalating. The war is spreading further and further in the direction of Europe. And this is a danger that simply cannot be brought to the head of Europe. So today it will be our task to make it clear that the risk of the escalation of the war is unacceptable. Quite simply because if there is a war between Europe and Russia, it will not survive Europe. And that's why we have to prevent the escalation of such a war.
This lawsuit exposes NATO Europe's biggest fear, legal collapse. The EU wants to bankroll Ukraine using seized Russian reserves, but Moscow says the move shatters international law and destroys trust in Western financial custody. Hungary has now openly warned that using Russian assets is a war provocation that risks dragging Europe into direct escalation with Russia. Budapest says confiscation would fuel a wider conflict Europe cannot survive, branding Brussels and Poland as war parties, while Hungary positions itself as a peace camp, and confirming legal action is ready against EU measures that violate its own treaties and endanger European energy security.
This is a danger that simply cannot be brought to the head of Europe. So today, it will be our task to make it clear that the risk of the escalation of the war is unacceptable. Quite simply because if there is a war between Europe and Russia, it will not survive Europe. And that's why we have to prevent the escalation of such a war. As for my colleague Sikorsky, he is a war party. I am a peace party. The Polish government is a war party. The Hungarian government is a peace party. This is the basis of all conflicts. And as long as they are war parties and we are peace parties, I don't see much room for agreement. Well, actually, we have made a decision together with Slovakia that we are combining our efforts. The legal works have basically been completed. So once the decision is being announced officially, then we have the legal opportunity to file this lawsuit. And we are going to do it as soon as it is legally possible.
For Russia, this is no courtroom drama. It is a strategic counterstrike. Moscow signals that Europe's banks, clearinghouses, and investors are now legitimate targets in a long global legal confrontation. Russia's central bank has filed the claim in Moscow's arbitration court, demanding compensation equal to the full value of assets frozen in Europe since 2022. The message is clear: sovereign reserves are not war reparations. Euroclear holds the bulk of the frozen funds, placing Belgium and the EU's financial core directly in the crosshairs. Analysts warn the case could open the door to asset seizures against European interests outside the West. Inside Europe, cracks are widening. Several EU states fear confiscation will backfire, triggering investor flight and undermining the euro's credibility as a neutral global currency. Moscow says this fight goes beyond Ukraine. It is about control over sovereign money in a multipolar world, and whether Western institutions can still pretend to be above politics.